Hey guys, welcome back to Sophisticakes by Mary. So for this tutorial, we're going to make this abstract modern tall cake that I decorated with some gold, of course, and some rice paper decorations. I love the combination of the red and the black and the gold, so let's get right to it. First things first, we're going to get our cakes ready. I don't always show this, but I'm going to show you this time. I went ahead and I'm leveling the top of each of my layers of cake. This cake was a 5-layer cake, and for some reason, you'll see in a minute here, I don't show you putting the last layer of cake on. I don't know why. Don't know where that footage went, but it ends up being a 5-layer cake. And the way I do this is I just hold my arm steady and I tuck my elbow into my side and I just turn the turntable and let that do the cutting for you, because your hand is holding still, and that way you get a level cut across the top. And I'm just filling this with my American buttercream, which I will link in the description below. And I'm not damming this time because my buttercream was fairly firm. I work in the studio, and when I'm not in my studio, I turn the heat down a little bit, so my buttercream got pretty firm. So it was a little harder for me to spread. And that's why I'm not doing a real thick layer. But if it were for an order, I would make sure that the conditions were right and that the buttercream was at the right consistency. And I always do a dam, which is a thickened rim of buttercream around the outside of in between each tier to hold your filling in. And I set it in the refrigerator to firm up before I did my crumb coat. Since this is a taller tier, I wanted it to firm up before I tackled putting the buttercream on the outside. Now, if you want to, you could add a cake board about in between the third and the fourth layers of cake for extra support, but this was a 6-inch cake, and it wasn't going for an order. So if it were for an order, I would probably go ahead and put a board and some supports in the middle of this tall cake. And in between each layer, I am refrigerating or freezing, just to make sure that my buttercream has set up and is firm enough to work with. And make sure you get that extra buttercream worked off the top on the top edge of the cake. I like to use the plastic scrapers. They just work better for my hands. I have small hands and I find they work easier. And now for these I always do that. Rice paper decorations or spring roll. It's rice paper or spring roll wrappers. It's the same thing. Wonton wrappers. I'm cutting them into, 8 pieces? No, 6 pieces. And I'm making these to me look like thin footballs. It's basically the shape, or a marquee cut, like in a diamond. And I'm kind of making abstract petals out of these. And I did 2 different sizes, the smaller ones, and then this way, in this piece, I cut them bigger. Use the curve of the outside of the paper to be the outside edge and then cut along the inside. Now I'm just placing these on parchment paper. And this is just water, warm water, and red food coloring. I think I'm in the mood for red because of Valentine's Day coming, and I got a couple Valentine's Day cakes coming your way very soon. And I'm just getting this to the depth that I want. And I'm just brushing the water, the tinted water, onto the petals. I'm just going to call them petals just for ease sake. Just brushing it on and turning them over, making sure they're fully saturated. You could dip them in the water, but I find that kind of makes it harder to get them to lay on the parchment paper real well. You wrestle with it quite a bit. And if you let them set, they will fully saturate with your water. You can go back over them again too if you want to make sure that they're saturated. I did 2 trays of these, the big ones and the small ones. It's the same technique on both, I just didn't show you. And to insert a wire for the ones on the top, it's just floral wire. And you want to the trick to this is and I could have let this dry a few more minutes, but the trick is to let it dry to the point where it doesn't look wet anymore. It's kind of more opaque looking or matte. It's not shiny anymore, but it's still tacky. And just lift your wire underneath the corner, lift it up, wrap it around with your fingers so that they attach to each other on the sides, on the backs of the floral wire, and then just spin it. That is the easiest way to do that. And here I'm just using some rolled up paper towels. I'm trying to add a little bit of motion into the sails, the petals, whatever you want to call those. You could also use a silicone mat and use some pins to gather it together, but I did not have any, so I had to make do with the parchment paper. And I set them in the oven on the lowest setting for about 20 minutes. 15 to 20 minutes on the lowest setting with the fan on low to dry these out. It really doesn't take that long, but then I let them cool on the parchment paper so that they did not curl up on themselves too much. Sometimes that will happen. And sometimes I'm going for that look, but this time I was not. And I'm just using floral wire to group a bunch of them together to put in the top. Now you want to, when you're doing this, it's kind of hard to get a good angle for when I'm doing this. For the best lighting, I kind of had to go from straight on top. But if you see from the front, you'll see that I'm leaving a little bit of length of the wire above the floral tape that I'm wrapping around this so that I can move them around a little bit. It's hard to explain. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. And I'm sorry, you can't really see what I'm doing, but I'm just basically wrapping the floral tape around the wires. Now you can kind of see what I did there. I cut the extra wire off the bottom and just stick them into a piece of foam. And I did 4, you'll see. I did a few more groupings for the side of the cake. And just set that to the side, and now we're going to go ahead and get our fondant on the cake. Now, if you have seen the video I did recently with the eggplant colored fondant where I show you how to not waste your fondant, this is the same fondant. This is what I had left over from that. And what I did was I just added black. It had a lot of depth already, so I added a little black. If you look closely and in the right light, you can see a little hint of purple in it, just a little bit. Because that purple had such intensity, such depth of color that even adding black to it, you can kind of see it right there. A little bit of purple. But that's okay. It oxidized to more of a black color once it sat for a while. And I had measured the height and the circumference of my tier, and I just cut it to size using my mat. I'll try to remember to add a link. I have a lot of questions about that mat, and I'll try to remember to put a link in the video description on where you can get one of those on Amazon. And I just put a little water. I'm just brushing it with water. You can use shortening. You can use simple syrup to attach your fondant. And the circle one I just laid on top and made sure I got the air bubbles out of it. And I let this set for a few minutes so that when I lift it up like that, it's not going to stretch and pull. I could have left it a few more minutes, but I was running short on time. And as you saw, I kind of put my arms underneath and lifted it up that way. If you let it sit long enough, I'd say a good half hour, you can kind of just lift it from the top and just drape it around. It's a little easier, but this worked too. Remove all those air bubbles, and then I'm using my ruler to cut the excess off. Cut through both layers and remove the extra pieces. And they should match up perfectly. And just kind of smooth that join where they join together down a little bit. And I just did a rough edge on top just by tearing off the extra piece. Now, if your fondant is a little softer when you have done this, when you got to this part, you could set it in your refrigerator to set up for about 15 minutes before you tear that edge off. And I wanted to have a little sheen, so I'm just using a clothes steamer. And what it's doing is it is removing the cornstarch that accumulates. And yet you see on your darker colors sometimes. But you need that cornstarch to keep it from sticking to your mat and to your roller. Using a steamer is a good way to do that, because you can use brush shortening on, but you kind of see the lines of where you've brushed it a little bit. And this is shiny for now, but it will dry to a matte finish given time, where the shortening won't as much. And I'm just sticking these in. Now, if you wanted to make this more food safe, if that is an issue for you, or, obviously if you're making it for an order, you want to make sure it's as food safe as possible. And these wires have floral tape wrapped around them, but you could always stick in some straws and then stick your petals in there. that would work fine too. This really looks like flames to me. I added some gold to the edges of the petals, and I just added some gold dragées of varying sizes and shapes. I thought the camera was on when I was doing most of that, but it wasn't. But you can see what I'm doing there, and I did that through the whole thing. And I had some gold spheres that I just went ahead and added. I already had those done. Now you could use gumballs to do that. You could make chocolate spheres if you want and just put them in a bag with some gold luster dust and shake them around. Very simple to do. And there she is, all done. I don't know why all my cakes are female. There he is. We'll say that. There he is, all done. I hope you liked it, guys. And I hope you like this more abstract, modern design. I hope you get something from it that you can use. And if you would, please like, subscribe, share, and send me any questions that you might have. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch my video. And if you'd like to watch some other videos, go ahead and click on the link to one of these other videos shown here. And if you would like to check out my other social media, I am on Facebook and Instagram under the same name, Sophisticakes by Mary. And please take the time to share, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you know when I upload another video. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next tutorial.